I grew up going to church, piling in the car and driving partway across town to attend the services at the church building. And I raised my kids to go to church, piling in the car and driving to attend the service at the church building. I did this because that's what everyone did. I did this because that's the only model I really was aware of. So naturally, that's what we did. And when we heard about someone that was doing home church, we assumed they were weird, or at least something was wrong with them that made them not want to meet at the building like normal people did. Well, for the last several years, I've been one of the weird ones, participating in church services, meetings of the saints, as it's called in the Bible, in my home and the homes of a few other people. It was a series of experiences and events that brought me to this place. And now that I'm there, the answer to 4 questions are driving me to stay there. Let me share those 4 questions with you today. Now, in order for these questions to make sense, we need to establish the basic premise of what we're comparing. In both situations, we're talking about 400 people. For traditional church, the premise is 400 people that meet together in one church building, so one group of 400. For the house church, the premise is 20 groups of 20 people each meeting in homes, so 20 groups of 20. With that as the setup, here are the 4 questions. Question number 1, which model better reflects the biblical description of the meeting of the saints? Question number 2, which model builds more personal, meaningful Christian relationships? Question 3, which model better develops more people to be able to discuss and share their faith? And question number 4, which model makes more funds available for evangelistic and benevolence efforts? There they are, the 4 questions. Now, let me offer a very brief explanation why the answer for me to all 4 of these questions is the house church model. Question number 1 was, which model better reflects the biblical description of the meeting of the saints? I'll make 2 points here. First, the Bible multiple times references the church meeting in homes. And while on a number of occasions it speaks to larger gatherings, none of these really reference a dedicated building for that purpose. I won't go into a historical lecture here, but mention of the temple or synagogue should not be confused with what we're talking about when we talk about church buildings. Second point, when Paul specifically talks about the meeting of the saints in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, we see an informal, very interactive group of saints, multiple people speaking, others testing what has been said, etc. This looks much more like what you experience with a group of 20 people in a home, as opposed to the formalized events of 400 people meeting in one big auditorium. Question 2, which model builds more personal, meaningful Christian relationships? I suppose people can debate this. If you want to defend the traditional church building approach, you can talk about the close relationships you have with some of those 400 people. I would just point out that those relationships probably rarely, if ever, exceed 20 or so people. And I think we can be honest enough to admit that those relationships weren't forged while sitting through a formal worship service. Those close, tight-knit relationships are almost always formed by spending personal, informal time together, usually in homes, sitting in the family room or in the backyard, or my favorite, standing around in the kitchen. Question number 3. Which model better develops more people to be able to discuss and share their faith? You see, in a group of 400 in a church building, it's only a handful of people that ever do any of the talking. And it's frequently a very small number of people that have any significant responsibilities. And the interaction and challenging that 1 Corinthians 14 speaks about, well, the logistics and format of an auditorium simply don't facilitate that. Now, some people will say, yeah, but that's what Bible class is for. Well, unless your Bible class is very different from mine, there's still very limited personal, intimate interaction. The overall environment in the classroom is still pretty formal most of the time. The much smaller, less formal environment in a home makes it much more likely that a larger portion of the attendees will be actively involved in the discussion. And the more practice you get talking about your faith in this environment, the more comfortable and skilled you get being able to share your faith in other environments. Finally, question number 4. Which model makes more funds available for evangelistic and benevolence efforts? There's quite a bit of research out there that has been done on how churches use their funds. And I won't bore you with a bunch of stats and details, but I will share a couple of summary facts. Of all that money that churches take in each year, about 85% of that is spent on salaries, maintaining buildings, and other internal church spending. That leaves only 15% to be spent on evangelism and benevolence. Now, if we meet in homes, we shouldn't need to spend any money on salaries, building maintenance, or other internal things that churches spend their money on. So if everyone contributed just one half as much as they did in the traditional setting, the money available for evangelism and benevolence would more than triple. The 50% they're now giving as compared to before would all be available for evangelism and benevolence, as compared to the 15% that was previously available. That's more than 3 times as much. So the answer to these 4 simple questions leaves me with this summary. Meeting in homes as opposed to the traditional church building leads to 1, a meeting that is much more like what is actually described in the Bible. 2, a much increased likelihood that I'll build deeper, more sustainable personal Christian relationships. 3, that notably more people will gain skills and confidence about talking about their faith, which, by the way, every Christian is expected to do. And 4, our financial giving can be increased towards evangelism efforts and benevolence. That's a no-brainer for me. Just like everyone else, I can rationalize and jump through hoops to defend what I grew up doing. But when I honestly answer these 4 questions, it's not even close. The house church model is a clear winner for me. I find it to be much more what God expects of me. As I close, let me say that I'm not trying to judge those who come to a different conclusion. That's not my job. And I'm not trying to create some controversy or division. But I'll also say I'm not ashamed to share why I do what I do. I do it with a clean conscience and for the purpose of glorifying God the best I can. I'm aware of a lot of people these days that are struggling or concerned or they just know that they're not maturing as Christians in the typical, traditional, institutional approach to church. If you're one of those people, I hope I've given you some good things to consider. Thanks for listening. God bless you on your journey.